TimmyG. Welcome to my track breakdown of making dubstep by only using the test oscillator in Logic Pro. All the sounds used in this track were generated through the test oscillator, and the only effects I used were EQ, compression, pitch shifting, and the fade tool. Today's tutorial will focus on how I made the drums for this track. Let's get started. So the first thing I'm going to do is play the track, and then afterwards I'm going to go and break it down step by step to show you how I made it by only using the test oscillator. So here's the track. So what I'm going to do is go kind of from top to bottom of this track, and I'm going to start with the drums and what I did to make the drums. So first, I'm going to actually go to the track where I made the test oscillator, and the way that I was able to manipulate this audio was to actually bounce it out. If you can see that my test oscillator right here is being sent to bus 1 right here. And you can pick all sorts of tones and generate sound. So to make my kick drum, what I did is I just picked a sine wave, and I believe the frequency I used was 110 hertz. And I'll get the level back up here, but I am going to mute the track so it's not annoying us. And then I soloed out bus 1, or actually I soloed out any track that I put as the insert of bus 1. So I'll make a new track by hitting Command D to duplicate this track. I'm going to turn this oscillator off. I'm going to send this to, I'm going to have it no send. And I'm going to have my input be bus 1, and then I'm going to solo this track, and then I'm going to hit record, and right now our pitch is recording. So this is plenty for a kick drum. So now I'm going to mute our test oscillator track again and just play back what we have here. And I'm going to turn off my tiny little demo mastering effect right here. So here is what we have for our track. And what I did is I cut it up really short. If you can see it down here, this is my kick. So I cut it out right here. I'm going to hit Command T. This is what I have to cut my audio files. And then my secondary click option is the fade tool. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to fade this out all the way to the beginning, and here's what it sounds like. I'll loop it quickly. But that doesn't sound very good. That kind of just sounds like you're plucking a low synth. So what I did is I changed the fade to slow down, and here's what this sounds like. And what the slowdown does is it lowers the pitch. So that's the beginning of this. The next step to make this sound a little better is to add quite a bit of equalization. So I'm going to click here, and I'm just going to play it. I'm going to get my cycle back. I did that by hitting C on my keyboard. I'll make it a little bigger, a little longer, I should say. And here's what we're looking at. I want to cut out some of this low end and then boost the highs to give it a little bit more character. So I'm going to cut this out, maybe about there. And then I'm going to boost this. Let's see, I'll cut this out a little more. And then let's see what this is going to do. Okay, so that's good, but I don't want all that high end. I'm going to want to cut out a lot of it, so something like this. And I want this middle area to have a little bit more punch, so around the 100 to 200 hertz, I am going to add even a little bit more, so I can bring this peak up a bit. And then right here around 90 hertz, maybe it's a little too high. So bring this yellow one down a little bit, and then we can make that a little bit lower. Maybe a little higher. But that's the general idea. So that's about it for the EQ here. The next thing that I want to do to this kick drum, is to add some compression. So I'm going to go right here to dynamics and add a compressor. And I'm going to get this cycle back. I'll zoom out a little bit. Let's get the full measure. I'll have the compression ratio about 2.5. I might turn my threshold down a little bit. Something like that. That sounds pretty good. So that's my basic kick drum. And then for the kick drum, if you can see this pattern down here, I had the kick drum like this. And then that just repeated. So that's about it for the kick drum. The next drum that we'll talk about is the snare drum. And I actually made the snare drum by using the noise setting on the test oscillator. So we'll go back to the test oscillator, and just for organization, I'll call this kick. And then next is snare. So I'll duplicate that track by hitting Command D, and then I'll call this a snare. I will reset my EQ and compression for the sake of this tutorial. And here's what the snare is going to sound like. So it's more so of a higher end. This is not as punchy as a snare. It's the higher frequencies. But the way to do this is we're going to we have bus 1 as our insert, which is great. And then I'm going to go back to my test oscillator here, which is we're sending that frequency, that sound, I should say, into our snare track. So I'm going to turn this on. And then I'm going to go to white noise here. And here's what it sounds like. So we're just going to record a little bit of that right now. So right here, I'm just going to go to the beginning of the track and then record. And we don't even need that much. We're going to cut it down to about this length down here. This is where my snare drum is. So I'll actually line that up right now. And then what I do here is I use the fade tool and just kind of fade out this white noise. So this is what it sounds like with just the linear fade curve right here. But what I did is I believe I made it a little bent. I'm hitting Command and clicking here, and then I'm going to move this even a little farther. So like this. So that sounds more like a snare that we're used to. So the next thing to add to the snare is some EQ and some compression. So quickly I will add some EQ and I'll get this loop back here. And what I'm going to do is I don't want any of these low ends. We'll leave that for the kick. And we want the snare. The snare can pop around 200 hertz, so I'll cut off until about 200 hertz. And then what I'll do is I'll take this yellow peak right here, and then I'll give it a bunch of gain, give it a little bit of punch, but this isn't that punchy of a kick. And then I'm going to make this a little bit more narrow. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut off some of these super high ends so we have room for the hi-hats. So maybe something like this. I made this 48 decibels per octave. And then I'm going to compress this so I can get rid of the EQ right now. I'll turn this maybe up to 3, and then I'll turn this threshold down. Maybe about right there. That sounds pretty good. So anyway, that's the basic idea for the snare drum. So I'll actually mute the snare that I just made, and then I'll play the kick and the snare pattern together. So here's what it sounds like. So you get the basic idea right there. The next instrument we're going to make is the hi-hats. And we're going to use the same white noise that we used for the snare drum, but we're going to use different EQ to make it sound more like hi-hats. So I'm going to duplicate this track here for the snare drum. And then I'm actually going to copy this down. I'm hitting Alt and click to do that. And then I'm going to call this hi-hats. So just as a reminder, this is our snare. And we want to turn this into a hi-hat. So I'm going to go to the EQ here. I can keep the same EQ and compression. I'm just going to affect the EQ. And I'm going to turn that off. And I'm going to turn this to 48 decibels per octave. Move this all the way to about 5 kilohertz. And then we'll see what we have right here. And I'm actually going to make this a little bit shorter. So what I'm going to do is hit Command click, because that's my secondary click right here, the fade tool. And I'm going to move this back a bit, and then I'm going to make this a little bit shorter. So maybe like this. So let's play this a little bit longer. So that sounds pretty good for hi-hats. And the compression sounds pretty good, so I'm not going to change that there. That sounds like it's working out. So I actually, for my track, used 2 different hi-hats, and you can see that I panned them a little bit. But let's see if I did anything different here. The EQs look a little bit different, so this one might be a little bit lower. Let's listen. Yeah, that one's a little lower, and this one is higher. But anyway, let's listen to the drum beat with both of these hi-hats and our kick and our snare. So that's the basic idea for that. The next drum element that I have here is the ride, and I use the word ride very loosely, I guess. This is just more white noise, just manipulated in a different way. So here's what it's going to sound like. And it's just more white noise, but if you can look at it, it is much longer. The white noise plays for much longer, and it slowly dies down. So this is the fade curve. This is still the fade tool, and it slowly dives down. And then this is the equalization. It's about 4,000 hertz right there. And this is what the frequencies look like visualized. Something like that. And then the last thing we have is the crash. And now I'm not going through each of these because manipulating the different types of cymbals are all similar. You still use the white noise. It just has to do with how you fade it out and what EQ you use. And the crash cymbal is, if you look at this, it is even longer. And you can see that this is the fade curve for the white noise volume, and then this is the EQ. We play some of those lower frequencies than just the super highs. So here's what the crash is going to sound like. So that's about it for the drum beat. So let's just hear the whole drum beat together. So that's about it for the drums in this track. If you like this video or if it helped you out, be sure to give it a thumbs up. If you have any questions or video suggestions, be sure to leave a comment. If you want to see more content like this or check out my original music, DJ performances, or DJ tutorials, be sure to subscribe to my channel. Thanks a lot.